Hello and welcome back to Podcast with a K. I'm your host Karla with a K, and I am joined on this fine Sunday evening by returning guest and fan favorite, Mack. Welcome back, Mack.
Thank you.
We all know that if Mack and I have a conversation about one thing, it spirals into a conversation about another, and that is exactly what we are here to give you. So, Mack.
Yes.
What's been on your mind recently?
So much has happened. I feel like this last month, there's just a lot of topics that have come to light, and I know everyone's like, new year, new me. But it's true, you kind of focus on different parts of the world that you hadn't realized were probable beforehand, or there's like situations that happened that you weren't aware of beforehand or didn't bother you a whole lot until this year. And I feel like that became prominent for you and I this week.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. It's been a moment of change. I, of course, would love to blame the moon for everything. Although, however, it's not the moon. Somebody sent me a post that said, there are no planets in fire signs. It's not just you going through it. And I was like, that's crazy. Because I, to be fair, that's a lot of keeping track of space for me. I don't buy into all of that. But when Max sent me that, I'm like, it's interesting because here we are again, blaming the sky. But that's not what we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about things that matter. And what matters is March is Women's History Month.
I love women. Okay, so I'm from Missouri, and there are people typically, I've heard people say, like, they don't understand why, like, gay people get a month, or why women get a month, and that kind of thing. These were also, like, straight cis men who said this, but I'm like, people who typically are oppressed in some way, in some society, typically get a month to themselves, because it's a way to bring awareness to what they go through. So for women, it's typically we don't get paid equally with men, typically how we look and how we aren't fair competitors in the workforce because we weren't working when your country was first founded. And typically, like, if you go by standard ideals, you're supposed to be a stay-at-home housewife and take care of children and stuff, which obviously is very different. 2022 is very different than that. And we need to focus on those issues.
Yeah, no, well said. I have always thought that kind of giving whoever it is a month is kind of a double-edged sword, right? Because although it is about bringing awareness and about celebrating somebody whenever possible, it's kind of like Christmas or an anniversary or Valentine's Day, right? You understand that the sentiment is year-round, but, you know, if you take this extra moment to celebrate it, what's the issue, you know? I do believe that people kind of take advantage of this time to talk about why they don't need a month, whoever they is at any given moment. But that's not the way that these things should be approached. And I say this as somebody who through the year has several months dedicated to some part of their identity, right? Do I think it's enough? No, nothing really ever gets done other than having conversations, which we love a good conversation. However, you know, what we want is action. We want results.
Yeah, and I think it's a lot different now because we do have things like social media, and that changes the game drastically because everyone can share their opinion at all times about all things, whether it's right or wrong, because it's an opinion. So everyone's like, oh, well, obviously what I'm saying is correct. And I think that can be a great space for people, but I think it can also be extremely toxic, especially for women. Because I notice, at least on my end, even on Instagram and stuff, but mostly TikTok, every single woman I see that's on there, there are so many comments about if she should wear more or less makeup, if she's too big or if she's too small, if she's eating correctly or not, if she's working out correctly or not, or if she acts like this, she's not going to be able to get a husband. Like, just very weird comments that you typically wouldn't say to someone's face, but somehow have a chokehold on the internet for women of all types.
Yeah, it's interesting being under so much scrutiny during what is supposed to be a time of celebration. And it also sucks that it gets politicized, right? Somehow being a woman is a political playing card. And why does it matter? Like, I simply am woman. That's it. It does not mean I think something or I believe something. Simply I am a woman. Because you know girls that you know that I'm sure you don't get along with, you disagree with ideally, but you're still like you're still a part of the same marginalized group, if that makes sense, right? And then there's also the topic of intersectionality, in which when you identify with a different group or another group, they tend to outweigh, whoever, whatever. But that's okay, like that is the human experience, is acknowledging and accepting each other's differences. And like you mentioned, there's of course, now that we have the internet and we're on everything all of the time, you get people being critiqued for everything and anything. Like, for example, right now, I'm sure there's someone that would say something about me showing up to do a radio show wearing no makeup, or you doing a guest appearance over the internet and you're wearing too much makeup. But, you know, are either of us doing too much or too little of anything? No, we simply are doing, and that is all.
It's it's so weird. I don't know. I want to know how people who say that stuff think, because I never like I have my preferences. Sometimes I'm going to think makeup looks bad. That's not specifically for women. That's just my personal preference. But I'm not going to be like, "Oh, you're a woman. How dare you wear makeup? How dare you not wear makeup? What the heck?" I'm like, "How do you think like that? Like how does that make sense to be like, "Oh, because of their gender, I'm going to do gender things that are going to hate on them for it." And I'm like, but why? What difference does that make in the world?
Exactly, and that's a really good point to make. Like, what is the impact? And it's you see it in different spaces and everything. Lucy in the chat, if you're watching on the behind the scenes stream on twitch.tv/Karlygirl, that's KarlyGiirl. Lucian says, for example, her mom will go to the hardware store to get stuff to fix her house, but they will say, "Oh, is your husband with you?" And she says, "I don't have one, and I know what I'm doing." She can't go buy a car at the dealership without having male friends to go with her. And Lucienne herself has short hair and does not want kids. And so it's a lot of identifying factors. But like you said, what is it that actually matters?
It's and especially like culturally, even in the United States, because I live in Washington now, but the Midwest and the South have very different standards for women and for beauty and stuff compared to like the West Coast or even East Coast. So I grew up like you need to be very ladylike, you need to wear dresses, you need to cross your legs, you need to make sure you always look presentable. And then I moved out here, and no one cares about things, and I much prefer that, by the way. And it was so different.
Yeah, the standards that people have for their idea of femininity is interesting and not always consistent worldwide. And we've seen a lot, like we mentioned earlier, especially in discussions online about how women should present. There are different beauty standards across, regions of a country, across states and cultures and continents, and wherever, whatever it is that uh, identifies your group. People are going to have different perceptions of it, and so it's damaging, I think, to consistently have so much feedback, but also to consistently read into the feedback. Once you kind of get into the circle of being an internet personality or being any sort of public figure, really, the first thing they tell you is don't read the comments, don't look at the comments, don't interact with the comments, because someone's always going to have something to say, and it isn't always healthy. For example, before when Mac and I were talking in a conversation that led to this, TikTok is, massive. You guys, if you've been listening to the podcast for a while, know that I have had my personal qualms with TikTok. At first, I didn't like it. I thought it was lame. Then I thought it was weird. Then I thought there's a lot of people who watch this who are grown adults when it's a app dominated by kids. But now it's become more kind of mainstream. Everyone's on it. I know people who are older and younger than me. I know people who are internet savvy or who are just there to like post promotion videos for like their fencing business. Like people are on TikTok for whatever reason. But anytime that there's the topic of tonight's show, of course, is women. But anytime that anyone posts something uh in any way, shape, or form related to how they look, there's always, oh, you're too this, you're not enough that. And so the topic that Mac had brought up to me was how damaging it is to have people be like, oh, you're too fat, you're too skinny, you're not eating enough, you need to gain more weight, you need to dress a certain way, you need to show off a certain way. And it's like, dude, you don't even know what the person is doing for themselves. How are you telling them what they are or aren't?
Another thing that this just reminded me of is people will give the most backhanded compliments on these things, and they'll be like, "Oh, I really wish I had your confidence." I'm like, that is such a backhanded compliment. Like, why would you even think to say those things? Like, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. And saying backhanded compliments isn't better than just straight up being like, "Oh, I don't like the way you look." It's like, come on, why does it matter? And also notice, like, specifically, women make so much content relating to how we look. Like, it's all weight loss or clothes to fit your body type to look slimmer or fuller in certain areas. And I'm like, I never see men do that. I see men make memes about Mountain Dew, and that's about it. Like, it is not as stigmatized in that community. Even for people who are trans, I know it's a very big deal, because if you don't present as the gender that you are, like, even if you're just like, I don't identify with the gender, if you don't look neutral enough, or if you don't look so feminine or so masculine, people call you out and you're like, you look terrible. I can still tell. And I'm like, okay, maybe they love the way they look, and that's totally fine. It's not up to you. If you don't like the way you look, you change it. But if someone can't change something they don't like or that you don't like in 5 seconds, it's not worth saying anything.
Exactly. And what's really tricky about gender identity is that it's one thing to identify as something, it's another thing for your biological sex to be on an identification card. And this is purely in reference to presentation, right? Because neither of us are, I think, here to tell you, uh, another lesson on why this matters, why this is okay, why this is what, like we've all heard this conversation in multiple spaces, right? Like what we're discussing here is that people are never going to kind of be satisfied with how you present your identity unless it is their expectation of identity. And that's, I think, where people who critique, for example, Women's History Month and the accomplishments of women, and people who critique having Women's History Month be used to celebrate femininity is interesting, because in defining femininity, you are also kind of by extension leading to the idea that masculinity can be defined. And a lot of people feel threatened, I guess, is the word that is used kind of widely whenever they're told that their concept of identity is incorrect. And that's the thing, though. Identity is a very personal thing. It's like when you walk into a room and you're like, hey, my name is George, but my friends call me Radar. I don't know if your friends call you Radar, but you're telling me that and you're telling me to call you Radar, so I'm going to be like, okay, that's kind of weird, but go off, Radar. you know? And so, like, why is it such a big leap from having a weird name or a weird nickname that you're trying to get to kick off to someone telling you, hey, you know, this is me?
This is just who I am. And like Lucian said in chat, the pet peeve is when people victim shame women by saying, oh, she was asking for it, dressing that way. I've had close family members not blame me, but be like, why do women wear such revealing clothing if they don't want that type of attention? And I don't think people outside of this community understand that sometimes women do it for other women. Like, it's not necessarily to get the attention of a potential suitor. Sometimes you look really good and you know your friends are going to hype you up for it. They're going to think you genuinely look pretty. They're going to know you look confident. They're going to be like, oh, I love that outfit. Where can I get that so that they can look confident? It's not necessarily like oh, I want everyone to fall in love with me thing. It's just like a women supporting women, like hyping up situation. And I think it's like that 99.9% of the time. But like, for instance, my close family member who's a male isn't in that community. He doesn't know that. So he's just like, there would be no other reason for you to do this.
Right. And like, it's also kind of dumb because you see this primarily within male athletes who will kind of, I guess, perform for the sake of impressing other male athletes, right? You want to be the best on your team. You want to be the best in, your region. You want people to hype you up for it. And if that's, or like, or whenever gym culture kind of began to be the new trend on the internet, of everyone kind of like everyone works out, sure, but of people posting it and sharing their routines and stuff, if it's okay for men to do it for the approval of other men because it's kind of become again, and masculinity is its own discussion, but it's become a trend, like I said, to kind of compare and contrast what's working for you, what's not working for me. Let's talk about it. Whenever women will say that, like, for example, if I do my makeup, if I go out and I buy foundation and blush and contour and lashes and shadow and liner and lipstick and whatever, a setting spray, the chances of my male peers knowing what these products are, what they cost, are pretty slim because the men that I hang out with are not the type of men that are, into makeup, and that's okay and that's fine. Not all of my girlfriends are also into makeup and stuff, but the ones that are will know. I went out shopping, I believe, with a group of friends back home. One of them likes makeup, the other one does not. The one that does like makeup asked me, "Oh my goodness, are those the new Huda Beauty lashes?" And I was like, "How did you even know that?" And she was like, "Oh my god, I saw those on Instagram and I wanted them and I recognized them because like the flare is like curled like really really nicely in the outer corner." And I was like, "Yo, that's crazy. Yeah, I did. A friend got them for me." And so she was like, "Wow." And so then that became a new conversation. And the friend that didn't care about makeup was like, "Well, what's the difference? They're all just lashes." And so we got to talk about that. And so I didn't go out wearing lashes because I was like, a man's gonna fall in love with me because I wore the new Huda Beauty lashes. That's I know that there's like other things that men focus on, and it's not necessarily the new Huda Beauty lashes. Not sponsored, by the way, not an ad, but like knowing that someone that shares an interest was able to connect because of that was really freaking cool.
It's almost like a sense of community. I think it goes for things, outside makeup. It could be a fashion brand. It could be a pair of sneakers that you really like. The people who know, and you're going to find your people based on how you present yourself or how you don't present yourself. And I think that's great. Like, do what you got to do. But it's almost like with social media, people learn a word and they just roll with it, especially on TikTok. Like they learn, oh, well, you probably have this type of, eating disorder or something based on how you look. And then they roll with that and then they bash you for it. And you're like, oh, well, you really need to do better. And I'm like, you don't know this person's medical history or anything. Like, why are you saying these things like you're a doctor when you watched a 60-second TikTok video on it? Like, yeah. That doesn't make you qualified.
And so Cup Smelly in chat says that they agree with what we're saying, but they don't understand why we bother giving these type of people any attention because their behavior might signify that they're looking for a reaction. And so acknowledging them is kind of letting them win. To which I believe that I have gone through a certain phase where I also thought that way, right? And I'm not saying like, oh, I've changed, I know better now. But for my own like personal sanity and happiness, I began to consider it in a different light where it's like, if I go around kind of ignoring all of these conversations, all of these critiques, all of these jabs and stuff, it's almost like instead of, doing things for me or for community or for celebration or for identity, instead of doing that, I'm kind of doing it out of spite. And I don't want my pure intention to be tarnished by like the fact that I need to brace myself to ignore all of these comments, right? And on the other side, kind of like with the podcast, I enjoy having these conversations with people who don't agree because I get a chance to understand why they have this misconception of, X, Y, and Z. And whether or not at the end we're able to come to terms or we're able to learn from each other, at least we tried, right? And that's not to say that every topic ever needs to be discussed with everyone because some people are just wrong and they refuse to let that go, and that's okay. And I don't want to associate with people who are so headstrong that they won't have a conversation. But I believe that because everything kind of stems from some sort of root issue or some sort of like uh you know I guess passing teaching moment, like you always have the chance to kind of mature from every interaction that you have. And if I handled it wrongly one time and I got into an argument because it's like, oh well, how much makeup is too much makeup, like it doesn't matter because now I'm like, all right, well that's not going to get me anywhere. Why do you think makeup is a problem? Why do you think being skinny or being fat is a problem? Like why do you care so much about what I look like type vibes, you know?
Another thing is stuff has been taboo for a very long time, and I feel like only in like this century almost has stuff like started, even in the last 5 years, this stuff really started coming to light that was never be spoken about like 50 years ago, ever. So if you don't talk about things that are an issue, people aren't going to be aware of it. Yeah, there's going to be some buttheads out there who want to do it for attention because they think they're so quirky and funny. But there's also going to be people who were raised that way and didn't know it was bad. And then they're going to be like, oh, I didn't know I wasn't supposed to make these comments or say these words or like look at it in that light because they were never shown that there's another way. So the less taboo you make a topic, it reaches more people, whether they agree with it or not. But there's going to be someone out there who resonates with what we're saying, or someone who didn't know this side of the story, and they're going to be like, oh, cool. I now am aware of this, and now I can like focus on it, or whatever they want to do, even if it's making those comments themselves, for the future, which I think is really cool.
Yeah, exactly. And speaking about like changing ideas for the future, Lucian in chat says, "Can we talk about normalizing women with colored hair and tattoos in the professional workplace?" And so this, I agree because if you, like I said, if you're watching on wexfm.com, hello, if you're watching on my Twitch stream, you will see that I have blue hair currently. Mack has pink streaks in her hair, and I feel like we are both people who have pursued, careers and career paths in professional settings. And the reason that I like having Mac on the show is because she's another person that I know that is also in college, but not here at my school. Very different experiences. We're from different places, different states, different backgrounds, different everything. And so, Mac, you are currently pursuing a career path kind of geared towards law, right? I'm pursuing a career path towards production and marketing. And both of us, I feel like, have gotten comments because we continuously dye our hair and change it up and do things. Um, and I think that critiques on like it being unprofessional are interesting and kind of old fashioned, particularly for the fact that if you're gonna sit in a chair and have your hair processed for 8 hours a day or have someone do a tattoo, are you not just showing that you are able to commit to a concept and stick to it and see it through? Isn't that a desirable work quality hiring companies?
It's so I'm getting my bachelor's in psychology and criminal justice right now for background, and we learned about this. And so it's an old-fashioned concept from baby boomers, the people who are running the businesses right now, because when they were growing up, people who had colored hair, not so much colored hair, but like piercings and tattoos typically were convicts and people who went to prison and jail, which was severely frowned upon back then. And they were like, how I could never, ever be that type of person. So if you had any of those markers on you, you were considered like a very bad person that wouldn't do well in society. And obviously that has changed for millennials and Gen Z and hopefully futures onward because I have colored hair and piercings and everything. And it's to the point where obviously Karla and I are not criminals. We have not gone to jail or prison. I hope we don't go to jail or prison. And colored hair, like, people are small, especially in Earth's history, but the fact that things such as colors in your hair that aren't natural upset people so much, and that a little piece of metal in my nose upsets people so much is absolutely bananas to me. So I'm like, why do you care? Because I personally feel more comfortable when I go to a business and I see people have colored hair or piercings or whatever, because I'm like, I relate to you. You're probably pretty swaggy. And we get along super well because we bond over it. Where if I'm seeing an old bald man who has none of those features, I'm like, I don't know if we're going to get along. I don't know what your vibes are. And I'm just less comfortable with the situation.
I like being able to know what people are expressing through their look. Kind of like on the opposite side of the same topic,
Yeah.
Abby also mentions that it's a part of her dress code at work to not be able to have dyed hair or visible tattoos. And I very much agree with this for the fact that if everyone is in uniform, if everyone has, then granted, there's some jobs that you need uniform because for your job, you need to be identified as a professional. So like doctors, nurses, police officers, when there's a uniform, that's not this convo. This convo is more so for dress codes like this at more casual workplaces because Abby works as a photographer at a photography studio. And so as long as she is wearing colors that don't distract from, you know, the experience that is a studio, usually in production you wear all black, um, having colorful hair doesn't necessarily seem to me that it's something that would be distracting, or a tattoo, right? If anything, it would be an icebreaker or a, I guess, little signifier that, you know, you what you like, what you care about, even if what you like is the color blue and what you care about is a live, love, laugh infinity sign. You know, the head of the department of my major, whenever I first met her, I was completely shook because she has two full color sleeves of beautiful, beautiful art. Like, she paid money for this, right? She sat there in the chair for however long she needed to get two full color sleeves. Oh my goodness. And it's gorgeous artwork, right? And so imagine if, and she you know, oversees so much stuff. Her and another professor just got a grant for like $30,000 for a project they're doing on the side. Imagine if, because she has tattoos, people were not accepting of the fact that she's good at her job and good at the work that she does, right? I personally do not have tattoos. I like temporary ink that lasts like, you know, 2 or 3 weeks. I usually use Inkbox whenever I want to see what a tattoo would look like, but I personally don't want to commit to them, so I don't get them. However, with my hair, I've been dyeing it since about 2015, and just I like having that pop of color. You know, I like having that as a signifier. Sometimes it's inspired by pop culture or a movie or a video game character, and other times it's just this color is pretty. I want that. And so Mac mentioned that it's a boomer concept, and when I started dyeing my hair originally, my dad was like, "What if you ruin your hair? Like, what if it's bad for it? You won't be able to get your natural color back. What if like you don't get hired? What if you don't get a job?" It's like, you know, I can cut it or dye over it. It's fine. And in the recent years, apparently my mom and my dad were shopping, and they were like, "Oh, Karla could try this out," and they got me like a new little like bleaching type kit thing situation. And so I was like, "Yeah, that's kind of cool." You know, they've come a long way because it hasn't impacted me, and whenever it has been an issue, I've been able to obscure it or hide it because, you know, sadly, those are still dress codes that we have to abide by.
Those dress codes in Missouri, like when I go back there, I know I get stares because having this, even though you guys can't see it, my right now my hair is very pink, just not in the lighting. I get stared because that is not something you do there. Like people are very, very traditional. And when I come out here back to Washington, it is the exact opposite, where every person you meet either has a tattoo, a piercing, or colored hair. All of my professors here, one of my professors is like 40 something years old, has a lip ring. Like, it's just something so natural here. But I remember back in high school, I had one teacher with a tattoo, and he like stood out like a sore thumb because no one else had that. Where here, it's the exact opposite. If you don't have any, you stand out more.
Yeah, it's it's really weird that it's still something that is so I guess pushed, that it's unprofessional, or that it shows, you know, some sort of lack of credibility, I guess, or integrity, because it's literally just the same as if I decided to wear really big funky earrings or like tiny delicate studs. If it's not a safety hazard, what is the issue? You know, if I'm not somebody that works in one of these positions that has to have a strict uniform for identification purposes, it shouldn't really matter. And unfortunately, this is something that follows women more than men, because I mean, I when I was growing up, I knew girls in like first grade that had highlights in their hair. You know, like it's so pushed from the start to chase certain standards. But there's kind of a disparity in what's acceptable in your presentation of yourself. Because like I said, these girls like had highlights, or they dyed their hair blonde in the summer, or, you know, there's the girls that were blondes and dye their hair black. But I put pink in my hair, and it's like, oh my god, Karla, why would you do that? That's so crazy. And it's like, I mean, it's another color. It's not my hair color. It's someone else's hair color. Maybe not a human person. Maybe it's a Bratz doll. But it's literally just a color. You've had blonde hair since you were 7, even though you're naturally a brunette. Why can't I have one little pink strand of hair?
I guess my father stayed consistent. I'm a natural blonde. So when I went brunette, he was like, ah, man, your natural color looks so much better. And they said the same things. It's going to damage your hair. It's going to do all this stuff. And I was like, hair grows back. I genuinely do not care. And then I decided to go bananas and dyed it pink. And he was like, professional setting's not good. And I was like, who cares? Who genuinely cares? Out here, you can't get discriminated against for that stuff. It's literally in descriptions that you can't get discriminated against because of your appearance. I'm like, it's 2022. The people are vibing.
Exactly. And the thing is, it bleeds into other things too. Right now we're talking about very blatant things like tattoos and hair colors, but because this chases like an ideal beauty standard, it's dangerous whenever you cross over into intersectionality and being from other places. It's been very prominent that whenever Americans with straight hair, for example, show up with braids or with curly hair, it's like, wow, very nice. But when someone who has naturally more textured hair, they're considered frizzy or unkempt or, undone. And so my hair is pretty curly. It's gotten curlier as I've gotten older. But I remember being a kid and whenever I had to put my hair in a ponytail, like drowning in a bottle of hairspray because God forbid I had one of these little curls get frizzy. Whereas the other girls that had the straight hair would also have like the flyaways and the baby hairs, but because they hang down, they're like, ah, yes, how cute and delicate. And it's like, dude, and that's coming from me, someone who is like, my only issue is just that I had curly hair, and that's someone who's not like my hair isn't like big, it's just curly. So girls that have very textured hair that have to keep it in braids and stuff, that's why that's also an issue because it's like, how are you going to tell someone that that's not okay for their hair? Or with dreadlocks, for example, as well. You're telling people manage your hair so it's not just big and all over the place. It's like, all right, we will do braids, we will do buns, we will do dreads, we will do anything and everything to appease you, right? And then that's not professional because it's not what is done traditionally with, straight hair, which is what at that point, I guess, had been the ideal hair type. Now we've seen a move towards accepting the fact that people have different hair textures and curly hair has kind of become more mainstream to the point where like I get ads for curly like styles more so than for straightening treatments, which is cool. It's good for me. But now we're seeing a shift to the other side where it's like, oh, if you have like, just straight hair, it's like, brush your hair, like do something to it, doll it up, get some volume. And it's like, you're always going to pick an issue with somebody for something instead of just letting them be.
Yeah, it's so weird. My dad has curly hair, so my siblings either have completely straight hair like I do. Mine's like kind of in between, but barely. So it's just like weirdly bobs at the bottom. And then my other sisters have like very curly hair. And growing up, I know they did our hair the exact same way. They would pull it as tight as they could because we were not allowed to have flyaways or anything. Like I said, we had to look as presentable as possible. And so it'd be very painful, more so for them than for me because their hair was a lot harder to manage going slicked back into ponytails and stuff. But I'm like, I'm glad everyone's just kind of vibing. I noticed the curly hair community is a little toxic on that side of TikTok, and they're like, your hair is it's barely even wavy. And I'm like, okay, whatever. Obviously, they don't have straight hair. Obviously, it's becoming less taboo to talk about it and get hairstyles for it and hair products and everything else. And that is so cool because all hair is so cool and it should be celebrated and not trashed on all the time.
Exactly. And it's like, I kind of going back to the original topic of having a month specifically for the celebration of women and femininity. It's the same thing as like we're talking right now about, for example, the curly hair community on TikTok being toxic, where you end up kind of acting the same way that you were treated. And that's where it gets dangerous because you get caught in this cycle where you're gatekeeping the female experience or the curly hair experience. And so, in general, that's why I eventually land at the point that, having these moments of celebration are good because they do raise awareness. And we're sitting here talking about it now. And, we're not the first and we won't be the last to do so. I'm sure if you get on TikTok later, because the way that the algorithm works, you're probably heard you think about curly hair and now you're going to see a curly video. So it's just like, open mind. And if you're one of these people that are like, oh, but, they've been told this or that. And it's like, okay, but how do we move forward from this conversation?
Yeah, it's interesting in the fact because I've never felt the need to comment on social media of people I don't know unless it's like a song being released. I'm like, tag me when it's out or whatever. And like, I've never needed to be like, oh, you look so gorgeous and stunning today. I'd be like, oh, that dress looks so bad on you. I just growth. It's not hard. I just want to people take the time out of their day to make a point.
Yeah, and it's frustrating to see that the attention often gets distracted into like appearance rather than content, because you'll have someone that's not even like doing it for the sake of being like a beauty or lifestyle persona, right? Someone can be talking about like, hey, this is an update on, give it, whatever political crisis is being discussed by the news right now. And they'll be like, oh, sick, but like, you're looking like you put on a little weight there. And it's like, why does that matter right now?
It really doesn't. And I feel so bad for news anchors because I know, because my dad's talked about it. Like if they don't have a button completely straight, or if there's a piece of hair, or if their foundation's slightly too dark for them, or something, people will email the news station and be like, "Your news anchor needs to work on that shade of white because she doesn't look good in it." And they have to listen because it's these people who are keeping them in their job. So then their job is like, "Hey, please don't wear this again," or do whatever because you're angering the viewers. I'm like, imagine getting mad over that though. Like that's so well, especially in the scheme of things that's happening right now in the world with Ukraine and everything. I'm like, I personally am like, why is something so small happening when other people's lives are being completely changed? And that's not even just with Ukraine. Like, obviously, there's always stuff happening specifically in the Middle East and stuff, but people typically overlook that because they're like, that's going on forever. Who cares? But I'm like, there are people who are still losing their lives and stuff every day, but you are worried about the foundation color of some news anchor you probably won't remember a year from now. God forbid it is slightly too light or too dark for them. Like, goodness gracious.
Do you remember there was a news anchor that had to publicly apologize because the dress she was wearing was too revealing, and it wasn't. It was a high cut dress, and the problem was that it was she was showing too much of her shoulders, and she literally had to make an
Yeah, I
apology
remember that, and
because
I was like,
yeah,
I mean, I've
they
seen
made the guy
people like
bring
news
out the
anchors on
sweater.
TikTok show emails and stuff of people saying like, I don't like these shoes on you. You need to straighten your hair better, like that kind of thing. And I'm just like, I can't believe they actually get comments like this on a news station,
Dude, they
like
brought
a
her out a
literal news station.
sweater in the actual broadcast, like on air, live, as she was doing the news, and they were like, "You need to cover up." That's so weird.
It's so weird and I don't like it, and I'm glad it's changing. It still has, obviously we've made jokes about it in our friend group about how we're showing shoulders or like showing ankles because that's such an old-fashioned thing. Like who cares anymore? Because
But
in
who
high
cares
school
that
we
people
obviously
still
had dress
care?
codes and stuff, but I'm just like, it is, everyone's gonna wear what they want to wear, and at this I'd rather people wear what they're comfortable in instead of what they think they should wear, because confidence is, I think, one of the most important things you can get out of life, and if you don't have that, you're not going to be happy.
Exactly, and it's currently and forever will be evolving. But now that we do have always, the reach to have somebody tell you everything about anything, because even if in person you're taught like, oh, you can't comment on people's appearance, people love to hide behind a screen, right? And that's how you get to communities that kind of push these ideologies. I know you mentioned earlier about how on TikTok, a lot of the ads that are targeted towards um, towards weight loss or towards fitness things. We were watching a video earlier about just like random products on Wish, right? And one of them was a spray that you put on your abs to make you have better abs. And it's like, first of all, that doesn't work. Second of all, why is this a thing that is being even marketed? Like, if you want abs, if you want muscle, the way you get muscle is by developing muscle. But the fact that there is so much advertisement for this is so awful. Whenever I personally open my Play Store on my phone, I always get the same ads for a intermittent fasting tracking app. I have never in my life looked up intermittent fasting. The only reason that I think that I'm getting fed these ads is because there's an app that I like that I've talked about before for other reasons. I think I talked about it because of zombies once, but it's called Zombies Run, and it's kind of like a fitness tracker type app, but only in the sense that it logs how long your run was, whether it's by time or by distance. And in the background, there are zombie chases and there's little storylines. So like that's the program, right? Rather than having somebody like fast, like quick stepping to a techno beat and telling you, all right, now 2 minutes sprinting, now 2 minutes jogging. Instead, it'll be kind of like the storyline while you're supposed to be like jogging or walking, and then there's a zombie chase when you're supposed to run, and it's supposed to be like cardio training. And so I started doing that because I like running, and so that's the only app that I have on my phone that I think would cause this to be there. But because I clicked on the intermittent fasting one, now I get ads all the time for intermittent fasting, for diets, for like different like weight loss pills and medicines. And it's like, dog, I never wanted any of this because my goal here wasn't weight loss or anything. I just simply wanted to run fast.
I think TikTok pushes that. Even in their ads, they have, like the diets or like whatever else. Or people will see someone and be like, oh, well, you should try the keto diet. I lost so much weight on that or whatever. But my whole spiel, obviously, I'm a very petite lady, and so I don't get taken seriously when I say this ever. But I will get, especially older women, a lot say like, "Oh, well, I wish I was as small as you and stuff." And I was like, it is very, very difficult for me to keep weight on. Which people would be like, "Oh, I wish I was me." But I got really, really sick a couple years ago to the point where I couldn't eat for 2 weeks, and I lost 15 pounds, which at my size was really, really bad. And I was like, I don't have that to like lose. So I'm like, it's not fair to say, oh, we can't body shame anyone, but then body shame people. Like, if you don't want to body shame anyone, it has to go for everyone, not just who you think can have it.
Yeah, and there's definitely a lot of discourse in fitness and beauty and health communities because the term body positivity was originally that, body positivity, because there was a lot of fat shaming. But now you get kind of what you're saying, in which whenever someone talks about the issues with being naturally slim or having a fast metabolism or, having an eating disorder or whatever it is, these people get attacked because it's like, oh, you are not the type of body that we were trying to support and we were trying to be positive to. And that's again rather dangerous because you're completely disvaluing somebody's experience. And even though maybe you are like the ideal for somebody else, does not mean that you are healthy as that ideal, right? Like you said, 15 pounds in 2 weeks, that would be like a dream for me, But if that's unhealthy for you because you already weigh like 2 pounds, like, now you're in the red, dude. You don't even exist anymore. You're a ghost, literally.
I'm gone. It's just I think body positivity needs to be a thing all around. But I'm like, you can't tell people what to eat or what not to eat or how to exercise or how to do something because you don't know everything that goes behind it. Like some people, their rib cages are just wider. You can't change your bone structure, so it's not fair to call someone fat because of their bone sizes. Like that doesn't make sense. And I'm like, there's so many factors that go into it, and everyone just needs to chill. There's going to be a bunch of different bodies, and that's okay. It doesn't matter. That's their business.
I mean, when I was a kid, I remember seeing movies in which the punchline was, "Does this dress make my butt look big?" And now there are ads for fake BBL, which is the Brazilian butt lift, in which you are attempting to have a bigger butt, and it's like, dude, where's the shift and where is the line? Because imagine you put in all this work to look a certain way, and now it's 10 years later, and you are the worst, most hideous creature because you put in so much effort into being a temporary style, which is also why, and again, Mack had mentioned earlier, the problem with fad diets. Like, for example, the keto diet, I remember when I was growing up, it was trendy to be pescatarian. You only really ate fish as your only source of meat and everything else is vegetables. Then the Mediterranean diet, where you eat like specific, like I remember a lot of these fad diets being a thing, and like shows like what's her name, the one that was kind of annoying, Rachel Ray, right? Like different cooking shows and stuff that would push this and like would publish books like to support certain dietary styles. And it's like, if your goal with a diet is to change your health, to change what you are eating for the nutrients that you're consuming, great. If you're doing it for caloric intake or for weight loss, that's unsustainable because the second that you eat differently, your body will, adjust to it. Because if you're talking weight loss, it doesn't matter if you're eating a plate of french fries or 72 bell peppers, a calorie is a calorie. And the only way to gain or lose weight is to consume more or less calories than your body needs for energy, because that's all it is. Calories are energy, excess turns into fat. If it's under, your body needs to consume it. So, that's how that works. That's your like 6th grade biology lesson for today. But it sucks to see that people still feed into these things because it's unsustainable, and it does lead to, unfortunately, to eating disorders. And eating disorder is not necessarily like, oh, anorexic, you don't eat at all, or bulimia, you make yourself throw up. An eating disorder is literally just disordered eating. You are eating in a way that is not healthy and that is not allowing you to consume the nutrients that you need to be healthy for what you are eating, because you could eat french fries all day and stay alive on calories and energy alone, but you're lacking so much in other nutrients. And because everything is connected, now you're accidentally causing future health problems that you won't even know about until they happen.
Yeah, and it's sad that America specifically, because that's what a lot of the fad diets I see come from. Because there's a lot of other countries, this is not even an issue, and where they're like, "What, we just eat what we eat." But here we have like 80 different diets, and if you don't follow like a specific one, people will blacklist you. It's like, why does it matter? Why can't people just eat what they want and call it good? It's also like very expensive to do a lot of these diets, especially
Yeah.
keto and Atkins and whatever else, because you have to buy these very specific foods and all of that stuff. I'm like, that's not fair to say the only way you can be healthy is for you to have the money to support that. That's not fair to people who can't afford that and maybe struggle to get fresh food and stuff, especially if you're on food stamps, because that's already hard enough as it is. I'm like, people need to be taught healthier ways to handle health, not weight, not how you look, but to make sure you're healthy. Just because I'm small doesn't mean I'm healthy. Like, I'm probably could not run for more than a minute without getting absolutely winded. Like, that's not how this works, you know?
Right, exactly. And it's so unfortunate to see that this continues to be a problem, like, time and time again. Because one diet in particular will be talked about. Like, do you remember whenever there was a time in which people were converting to veganism, but only for weight loss? But then, you can eat things like Oreos are vegan. Oreos are not healthy. What nutrients are you getting from an Oreo? And I remember that being like an entire thing on the internet because people were like, oh, this is how you can eat like you did, but now vegan. You're gonna lose so much weight. It's like, no, you're not, because now you just ate a whole pack of Oreos for breakfast. That's still not sustainable. It's not healthy. You're not
It's
okay.
not healthy. I tried being vegan for like a month and a half, and I was not eating enough food for what I was doing for it to be a sustainable lifestyle for me. I was like, this is not good at all. There are a lot of unhealthy things on there, and it's just like, why stick with it? Just because it has a title doesn't mean it's good for you. Because if you just ate broccoli and worked out for 30 minutes a day, you'd probably get even better results than sticking to something that's not going to be trendy within the next 2 years.
Yeah, and it's uh, and it all kind of just comes back to the whole theme of tonight, which is being able to kind of separate like people's feedback and criticism from what like, whether it's your identity or whether it's your lifestyle, whether it's your health, like being able to do what's right for you and what's going to make you happy rather than what people are telling you that you need to do or that you need to be.
Right, and as Lucien said in chat about how people need to learn how to cook, and over the last 20 years, Lucien feels that it's just been super processed. And I know over COVID, I cooked all the time at my home. But then when school starts, and I think you can relate to this, when school starts and you have all those club activities, you have things like the podcast, but then you also want to hang out with your friends online, but then you also want to hang out with your friends in person. It's not feasible to spend 3 to 4 hours cooking and cleaning up a homemade meal compared to just grabbing a frozen Uncrustable or a package of ramen and going. And I think part of that is the lifestyle that America has put on us. So not only are we supposed to have a fast-paced lifestyle, but somehow on top of that, we're supposed to have the time to eat healthy. But on top of that, we also need to pay attention to how we look because we're women. And if we don't do all of those things, then you're deemed a bad citizen and that you're lazy and that you don't take care of yourself and you're not going to make it far in the world. And I'm like, that, it's all connected and it's so stressful.
There's so many like different people telling you need to be so many different things. And it's like, I'm only one person. I'm just a woman.
I'm just a little woman. I just sit in the kitchen all day and do nothing else.
Exactly. And for all legal purposes, that was a joke.
That was a joke.
Mac, as we reach the top of the hour, thank you so much for doing the show and having this conversation. Happy Women's History Month. It is almost International Women's Day. The most important day of the year. Do you have any final closing remarks and or statements before you tell us about your final song?
I just say love yourself. Be careful what you say to other people. Like I said, if it's not something they can fix within 5 seconds, typically just don't say it. And have a great National Women's Month because women are awesome.
Thank you, Mac. All right, so tell us, what song will we be closing out tonight's show with?
So it's called I Hope You're Happy, and it's by a band I actually found on TikTok. And it is a very kind of like early 2000s punky style, and I am absolutely in love with it and shared it with Karla the other day. So now I'm going to share it with all of you.
So, thank you so much for listening to Podcast with a K. I'm your host, Karla with a K. Signing off. You're listening to WECS 90.1 FM. Mac, thank you for doing the show. And this is I Hope You're Happy by Games We Play.